right, so check it out. Just strung up this old Gibson L2, and I think it was made in the 20s, 1925 maybe, 1928, and it came to me with a major break in the top. Maybe you've seen the pictures of it in other posts, but I think we've all seen a bridge that is coming up. Well, this one, actually, the top was cracked open and you could see down into the body. So the bridge was still connected to the top, and the top had cracked off. And that's just the worst to see that. I mean, really, what do? You usually glue back down to a top that is in fairly good shape. Here you had a top that was just cracked open. And apparently that exact damage had happened before in the 80s. And the late Dale Bluebon, who was also a local luthier, fixed it. And what he did was he put a piece of maple inside this area here, pretty thick piece of maple, to shore it back up. And this is the piece that came out and was made to fit down inside there. And you can see where it cracked when the damage happened this time. This piece cracked like that as the strings pulled up. And so the piece of maple did not stop it from happening again. But I had no choice but to maybe even redo that same repair, because you need a place for everything to go back down onto. And the owner told me that it sounded pretty good with that piece of maple in there. I really thought this was too thick. I mean, it just seemed like something that would stunt the sound of the guitar, but she said that it sounded good with that plate, so I went with the same idea. Let's put a plate back in and shore it back up. So I've made another maple plate. However, getting this piece out, because it was still glued in really tightly into this back section here. See all the old glue there. Fighting to get that piece out was one of the worst things I ever had to do, because you don't want to ruin the top of the guitar any worse than it's already ruined. So what I did was this was about to fall off anyway, so I pulled it off, kind of broke all the pieces in the front because they were still kind of hanging, and took all of the pieces that fell out and just put them in a bag. And I said to myself, oh, I'm going to deal with those pieces later. Maybe they will come in handy. So then I set about trying to get the maple out. I did get it out with heat and prying and save the top from any more damage. And then I made my own piece of maple, and it's in there right now. It's glued in. You can see pictures of this if you look at a different post. And then my next idea, well, we couldn't go too much further actually, because even before I put the maple in, every one of these braces, they were all loose. And that's kind of why the top was horribly bowed. And I said to myself, well, we got to get those braces together first, because you're just not going to have any structure to hold the thing together. So each brace had to be taken out and cleaned up, and the inside of the top had to be cleaned up, and those braces had to be glued back in. And they had been worked on before. It was such a mess getting those out and getting them back in. And I figured that since the braces weren't touching anymore, that's why the top was bowed. But once the braces went back in, I realized that the braces themselves actually had some bow to them. And because they're very thin, and those thin braces are really what make a guitar sound so nice. If you build it stronger with bigger braces, now you're making a quieter guitar. You're stunting the sound. So the best sounding guitars are the ones that are built with less strength. So you always want to build strong, but then you're ruining the tone. So I wanted to use the original braces just because I knew they would sound good, and I knew that's the original thing. Plus, I wanted to do it all from the outside in. I didn't want to take the back off. Taking a back off a guitar is, I mean, the binding has to come off. It all has to go back. And I've learned no matter how you shape a piece that's going to hold it all in the same place, it never goes back on the same way. This wood is dying to be in a new position, and it's being held right now by the back and the sides. And the second you take it off, it just jumps into this new shape, and it does not want to go back. So I did not want to take the back off. So I did it all from the hole, even this hole. This was basically a gaping hole after I took it apart. But I worked with both of these holes to get everything back into place. And usually you don't have a hole here to work with, so I really used that to my advantage. So, so once I had the braces all together, which took months and months, I put that piece of maple in. And once the piece of maple was in, then I had a level surface here to start putting all those little puzzle pieces back in. All those pieces of mahogany that broke off, I found where they went back. And I glued them all back in with crazy glue. And it was like a gel crazy glue, which turned out to be the perfect thing to use. And then once I started sanding flat again, I realized I was looking at the top of the guitar again. It actually had a look that gave me confidence that I could actually glue it back together. So I went for it. I actually shaped the top. You know, I couldn't get it flat again. I mean, I got it close, but I couldn't get it perfectly flat. So I shaped the bottom of this to match what I was missing on the top. Because if I really were to get it flat, I would have to take a lot of the top off, and I would lose a lot of the finish. So I didn't want to do that. So I reshaped the bottom of this. And then my last step was to put in 3 screws. There are 3 screws with nuts on the inside, and they are also holding this thing down because that didn't happen last time. Last time it was just all glue and stuff came apart. So now we have 3 screws, which is common. I even did an old 20's Gibson that had 2 screws with inlays on them. So this time 3 screws. Set it up, strung it up, gave it a strum. I couldn't believe it. It sounded amazing. I didn't do any fret work yet. We could do a little bit, but it's pretty good. Needless to say, we hit the ceiling on the budget of this. We don't want to go too high. And there are still braces on the back of this guitar that are not connected on both sides, but the braces on the back of the guitar are not nearly as important. You just got to make sure you don't hit the back of the guitar very hard, because then you will put more cracks in it. That's really what those braces are there for. But this can be played right now. It's not perfect. It's kind of ugly. It's almost like a Frankenstein. Look at all that went back together. You know, but it's got a Willie Nelson vibe now, and it's playing beautifully with great action. Obviously, more cosmetics could be done. The whole top could be refinished. I mean, the whole guitar could have a new top put on it too, but that was not within the budget. And look at this beautiful purfling or binding. It's gold sparkle. And the finish alone is interesting. It's called Argentine gray. I just can't imagine redoing the top of this guitar. And you'll lose that sound. It just has this neat sort of woody thing. Now I put silk and steel strings on it, and that lightens up the tension. This guitar should never have bronze strings put back on it. I think it should be silk and steel from now on. And it should be tuned down when it's not being played to make this thing last much longer than it originally did. Of course, it should be kept in conditions that humans are comfortable with, not in basements or attics or hot cars. And I always tell people that your guitar will last if you keep it in a good humidified room that you are comfortable breathing in. So there it is, the L2 that I never ever thought would play. I had no confidence in myself to do this. And here it is, it's back. Never did anything like it with all those puzzle pieces, but it actually worked. So there it is.